Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about 5 Irish books that I've read. Most of them are really good. Have a couple of unpopular opinions about a few of them, or at least one of them. And I'm just really excited to talk about this with you. Now, if you're new to my channel, then know that my name is Shelly and I love books and reading. And I have been reading a lot of Irish literature recently, and most of them have paid off. So if you're watching as an unsubscribed person, I would encourage you to subscribe, stick around, and without any further rambling on, let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. Let's start with the book that I didn't really like. And unfortunately, unfortunately for me, it's a book that everyone loves, so I'm so sorry ahead of time, but it is Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. Now, I have read Foster, and I liked Foster. Claire Keegan writes these really short little books, and they tend to be poignant and sweet, there's an economy of words, so on and so forth. Am I just avoiding as to explaining what I didn't like about this book? Possibly. I think what I didn't like about the book was that there was not enough meat on the bones for me. Now, Foster worked for me because I think it was Jack Edwards that said it best, which was that Foster was more about what was not being said. There was so much in the silences in between, and that was kind of what the story was about. I guess you could say that Small Things Like These is also about the silences. It's about religious corruption and being complicit in that. And a man with a family sort of being confronted with religious corruption and then having to confront his past and his present, and you're left wondering, like, what are you going to do about that? And it was sweet. It was, I don't know, it was sweet. Again, there's like not a lot to talk about. I have tried to talk about this in a couple of different videos, and what I have to say about it is like very sparse because I feel like the story was sparse. I don't know. I just didn't really like it. I wish that there was more character. I wish that there was more shape in my memory of the book, of how the book went. So I do think that some of the themes were really interesting. I just wish there was more of it. So that one's at the bottom. The next one I have actually talked about in a very recent video in which I talked about thrillers, so I'll kind of go through this quickly. But it is Unraveling Oliver by Liz Nugent. This is a thriller book in which we meet Oliver at this moment in which he has done something horrendous to his wife. And from there, we're trying to figure out why this happened, and what kind of person he is. And we get that story. I thought it was good. It was definitely readable and enjoyable, and there were quite a few twists and turns. She made it work together really seamlessly, like the flow of it and what was revealed at great points in the book. Like, she had really good timing and really good plotting. I just wanted a hair more from her in terms of her writing. I thought her writing was a little flat. But so there's Unraveling Oliver. If you're like, I really like following or understanding one single person, the psychology of one person, I think that you will like this book. But just know that it is like thriller through and through. Yeah, I think it's billed as a thriller, a mystery thriller kind of thing. Anyways, we're gonna move on from that. The next book I read for the Women's Prize, and it is Nesting by Roisin O'Donnell. Now, this was longlisted, but I don't think it was actually shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2025. I picked this up because I thought the premise was intriguing. The premise is that in Kiara, in a moment, the main character decides to take her children and leave her husband. And it's really kind of a bit of a snap decision, and through that decision, along the way, there are all of these hurdles for a person that is in a vulnerable situation. She doesn't have a lot of access to her finances because of this complicated and abusive relationship that she's in with her husband. She doesn't have access to, I mean, not just finances, but there are also just like roadblocks along the way that you discover as a reader. And so it's like, what do you do in terms of housing and in terms of daily life when you are in this vulnerable situation and you don't have a lot of money to like do stuff, like to rent a house? Like, how do you go about living your life when you're put into this position? And so, you know, as we are watching this woman attempt to rebuild her life, we are also getting more about who her husband is and the way he treated her. She starts to process everything that she's been through, and you watch her grow. It really should be like blooming or something, like instead of nesting. We watch her transform. So I liked it. I thought it was a really strong debut. I think that the first half was stronger than the second half. I really found the processes in which another country goes about helping vulnerable people and some of the structures that are in place in order to help those in situations such as this. I thought that was really interesting. And there was also just some really touching moments when we're watching Kiara kind of get her life back and grow as a human being, and what all that has been taken from her, that her husband has worked at just undermining her and taking just ever so slightly, just constantly just nipping things away from her and leaving her a little like a shell of her former self. So anyways, it was good. It was a good read. All right. So that was definitely a solid read. And I'm very interested in what Roisin O'Donnell is going to do next. And then the next book was, I don't know, the top two is this. One book, which I'm going to talk about next, has a simpler premise, and it is executed perfectly, flawlessly, so good. The other book is definitely far more ambitious in its writing, and it mostly pulls it off. So that's what we're dealing with. So I think I'm rewarding the more ambitious book that doesn't quite pull it off as seamlessly as this book, but the writer is doing so much more. So the book that had a simpler premise that pulled it off wonderfully, like absolutely perfectly, was was it the Rosie incident? Oh my gosh. I think that's what it was called. The Rachel incident. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I looked that up. The Rachel incident by Caroline O'Donoghue. I'm laughing at my own self. Okay, so The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue, what an Irish name that is about the main character, Rachel. And Rachel she's in an older state of her life. Looking back, she's, I don't know, somebody in her 30s, maybe in her 40s, looking back on her life. I think she's actually in her 30s. I'm trying not to go down a rabbit trail. She's looking back on her life when she is like at that really awkward, rapid change moment of being 18, 19, 20, 21, right in that little time frame where you are on your own for the first time. She was on her own for the first time. She's in school. She's working one of her first jobs ever. And in this, in a romantic relationship for the first time, or like a true like boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, but also in a best friend relationship for the first time where you really need each other, partly financially and also definitely emotionally. And her best friend is James, who is this incredibly flamboyant, very open gay man. And they both work in a bookstore together. and she's doing her coursework and she's degrees. She's working on her degree, and she has a crush on her professor, and there's all this lore around her professor, and then the plot takes off from there. And what was so great is that I really loved that Rachel, the character of Rachel, is looking back on her life, and she's looking back on it sort of being like, oh my gosh, I was such an idiot for doing this thing, or like, I cringe at my former self for saying this thing, and oh my goodness, of the things that stuck with me, that is the thing that hurt the most. And of someone that's of similar age to the older protagonist of Rachel in the book, I can look back at my former self and I have those same thoughts. Of course, she's talking about this life-shaping incident that happened, and you were building to it as to what is the Rachel incident. It's so funny. I was describing this book to my husband, Ted, and he was like, that sounds so dark. And I was like, but it's not. It's like this, it's like a comedy of errors almost. Whereas like when you're explaining it to somebody, it does sound kind of dark, but it's truly not. It's not. The tone is incredibly light. It's so funny at points, and some of it is just so cringy, but again, there's this sense of forgiveness because you're looking back on this younger woman who is still trying to figure out how to be an adult and making a lot of mistakes, making immature decisions. And also there is this, like, at the heart of it, it's not about her relationship, it's about her like romantic relationship, or James's, her best friend's romantic relationships. It is about one's best friend, and having a best friend at that age, to the point where like at times it could be kind of toxic, and the moments when you're selfish and you shouldn't have been, and the moments when your best friend is selfish and they shouldn't have been, and trying to meet them in the middle and trying to be an adult and have adult relationships for the first time. And there was just, it was so good. It was so good. And it ended like right at the right spot. And it was just in a lot of ways overflowing with a lot of joy. And the characters were really great. And again, there are these moments where it's sort of like I would cringe because of the things that were happening in the book. And somehow I would just like, it was okay because you had this older narrator that's like, I know how cringy that sounds. I know how cringy it was for me to do this awkward thing in front of somebody else. And like, I was so embarrassed by my former self, but what can you do about it now except for tell the story in the way that it's supposed to be told. And so it ended up being really, it was good. It was a really, really good book. And I'm so glad that I read it. And then the last book that was more ambitious and that I've mentioned here and there, but I definitely wanted to wrap it up in my like Irish reading wrap up recent reads video, whatever this is. And it was Milkman by Anna Burns. Similarly, we are getting the perspective of an older woman, a woman who is outside of this frame of time of the story that she's telling. Again, we're getting somebody who is, I don't know, late teens, later teens, 16, 17, 18. And it's told in a stream of consciousness style. It's told in this way where there are no identifiable names, places, everything has a nickname, everything has a quirk, a little tagline to it. And so our narrator is middle sister, and that's what she calls herself. And there is the milkman, who is not really a milkman. And then there's like the real milkman, and her mother, and the younger sisters and older sister, and so everyone has these nicknames of how they are related to her. And what was interesting about that, I mean, ambitious choice, right? Not just to have an unnamed narrator, but to have all unnamed characters. I mean, her boyfriend is named Almost Boyfriend, and her brother-in-law is, first brother-in-law and then second brother-in-law, and she has different relationships with each. Oldest sister, and then like second oldest sister. Everything is told in this way, and even the neighborhood is told in this way. Just there's no street names or anything like that. but we are in the Troubles in Ireland. Anyways, it was an ambitious choice, right? It was an ambitious choice for Anna Burns to do something like this, where nothing is named and everything is a nickname. But what was interesting is that after a little while, I sunk into it right away, like the language of it, and I was understanding what she was doing. That what was interesting is that it felt like somebody was just telling me a story. And instead of doing that thing where it's like, so-and-so, name, insert name here, and then you have to sort of comma, my older brother-in-law, comma, or my oldest sister's husband, comma, you know, like where you're just trying to constantly keep the name in frame with who they are to you. It's like she just cut out the names. And it made it feel very intimate. It made it feel as if I was sitting down with a woman who was telling me about this period of her life, and she was being really honest and open about it, and had this way of speaking where I didn't have to ask her, wait, who was that again? Because it's there embedded in how she's referring to them. And then, so the story itself, she like gives away the inciting incident at the very, very beginning. Like in the first page, she's like, this happened, traumatic event, and I'm going to tell you, now that you know it, I'm going to tell you how we got there and then cycle back around. So that was interesting because I felt like that was a really bold move on her part to just be like, these things happened, and it's like the pinnacle moment. So now you're like, okay, so how did you get to that point where you're in this vulnerable position? And so that I thought was a really ambitious choice. Writing it in stream of consciousness was an ambitious choice. Writing it about, like, set in the Troubles was an incredibly ambitious choice. And ultimately, it's about the way that middle sister, our narrator's reputation and character within the neighborhood. You know, she at first is sort of this nonplussed character or like person in the neighborhood just living her life, and how she ends up becoming the focus and the center of attention through gossip and misunderstanding. And there are these moments where I'm like, I felt enraged for her. I was like, that's not true about you, or, you know, or why would somebody say that? So I was enraged. I was like emotional about the way that she was being treated, the way that she was being talked about, and also feeling like really helpless because, you know, you can't control the narrative about yourself as much as so many of us, including myself, try to do. That she had no control over the way that people were speaking about her, and then other people's advice on how to like dampen the narrative and change the narrative. And meanwhile, what she's going through in her life is complex. You know, it's that same age. I think she's a little older than 16, but anyways, it's that same age where like everything is new and fresh, and you're going through your first relationships, and you're out in the world by yourself for the first time, and the way that maybe your attention is being drawn to you, the way that you're drawing attention to yourself, and being in this vulnerable time during the Troubles in Ireland where you don't really want to have attention drawn to yourself. And, you know, how much of it is just your natural personality and how much of it can you control. It was so good. Okay. The only thing is that when she starts to wrap it up, like when we get closer and closer to the incident that she told us about at the beginning, Anna Burns does, it starts to get a little quirky and it starts to get a little zany. It starts to like go a little unhinged. And she ends up like pulling it back and tying it all together at the end. But there was a couple of chapters in there where we're really getting to the moment that she alluded to, or she tells you about at the very beginning, that I feel like it starts to almost feel a little bit unhinged in this way where like the timeline starts to get a little sloppy. I'm not really sure where we're at in time. It gets a little slapsticky. It just starts to feel a little unlike itself, unlike the rest of the book. for like a very short amount of time, but it was definitely noticeable. And then she gets it back on the rails for the very end, and we have this ending, and I thought the ending was perfect and great and wonderful. But that's what I mean, is that it was the Rachel incident was a simpler concept that was executed perfectly, whereas Milkman, to me, was very, very, very ambitious, really, really, really good. Like probably one of my top 5 books of the year so far. And yet it has a little moments where it sort of seems to slip up and be unlike itself. But still such a good book. Oh my goodness, what a good book. And yeah, just an absolute corker. So if you were thinking, if you like stream of consciousness style books, if this sounds good to you, and a lot of the themes are, you know, the way that women exist in the world, the way that we're treated, the way that people look at a young woman who's growing into herself, what she can and cannot do, how language and rumors can be harmful, what to do about that. And also if you're interested in the troubles during in Ireland, you know, the time period, this might be a really great book for you. Because like I said, it was so ambitious and so much of it was so good. So yeah, that's it. Those are all the Irish books I've read recently. I'm so excited to have shared them with you. Yeah, let me know if you've read any Irish books recently. My favorite book of last year was an Irish book, The Bee Sting by Paul Murray, which was amazing. And yeah, I would just love to know all about your Irish book recommendations. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me. I really appreciate you. And I will see you all hopefully in my next one. Bye!